I still remember the exact moment I realized my own family was betting against me. Not just doubting me, actually betting like it was a game, like my entire life was their personal entertainment. It was Thanksgiving dinner, 2015. I was 23, sitting at the far end of the table in my childhood home, the one spot that had always felt like exile. My older sister Nicole sat at my mother's right hand, her engagement ring catching the candlelight like it was designed to blind everyone in the room. My brother Marcus held court at the other end, fresh off his promotion to senior analyst at some finance firm, his wife hanging on his every word. And then there was me. "So, Jenna," my Aunt Carol said, her voice dripping with that particular kind of false sweetness that always preceded humiliation. "Still working at that little coffee shop?" I felt every eye turn toward me. The turkey on my fork suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. "It's a café," I said quietly. "And yes, I'm still there. I'm also taking online classes." Online classes. My mother's voice cut through mine like a blade through butter. She didn't even look at me, just reached for her wine glass. How ambitious. The laughter that followed was gentle, polite. That made it worse somehow. If they'd been cruel, I could have fought back. But this casual dismissal, this soft mockery, it slid under my skin like a splinter. "Give her time," my father said, and for one brief, stupid moment, I thought he was defending me. "She'll figure out eventually that life requires actual effort. Can't coast forever on participation trophies." My face burned. I looked down at my plate, willing myself not to cry. "I don't know, Dad," Marcus said, leaning back in his chair with that smirk I'd grown to hate. "I've got $20 that says she's still at that cafe in 5 years. Any takers?" "Marcus, don't be mean," Nicole said, but she was smiling. Always smiling, that perfect, pitying smile. "Jenna's just finding herself. Some people take longer than others." "I'll take that bet," my Uncle Richard said, pulling out his wallet. "But I say 3 years, tops, before she moves back home permanently. Remember when she quit college? That kid's got no follow-through." I had quit college. That part was true. I dropped out halfway through my sophomore year at a state school because I couldn't afford it anymore, and my parents had made it clear they weren't helping. "We paid for your first year," my mother had said. "The rest is your responsibility. We didn't raise you to be dependent." They'd paid for all 4 years of Nicole's private university education. They'd covered Marcus's MBA. But I was supposed to be independent. The betting continued around the table. 5 years. 3 years. My cousin Sarah thought I'd be married to some loser and pregnant within 2 years, because that's what girls like that do when they can't figure out real life. My grandmother stayed quiet, which somehow felt like the worst betrayal of all. She'd been my ally once when I was small. Now she just looked at me with something like disappointment glazed over her cloudy eyes. I excused myself before dessert, mumbling something about an early shift. Nobody tried to stop me. As I grabbed my coat from the closet, I heard my mother's voice drift from the dining room. "She's sensitive. Always has been. I just hope she doesn't waste her entire 20s feeling sorry for herself." I drove home to my tiny studio apartment, the one with the leaking ceiling and the radiator that clanked like chains at night, and I cried until my ribs ached. Then I stopped crying. Something cold and clear settled in my chest where the hurt had been. They thought I'd fail. They'd literally gambled on my failure, turned it into dinner entertainment. Fine. I'd show them exactly what failure looked like. The next morning, I woke up at 4:30. My shift at the cafe didn't start until 6, but I sat at my thrift store desk with my laptop, and I made a list. Not a dream board. Not some motivational nonsense. A concrete, specific, ruthlessly honest list of everything I wanted and everything standing in my way. I wanted money. Real money. The kind that bought silence. I wanted respect. Not the performative kind my family gave each other at holidays, but the real thing. The kind people couldn't fake. I wanted them to choke on their bets. I was good at exactly one thing. I could sell anything to anyone. I'd been doing it since I was 16, working retail, making commission, convincing people they needed things they'd never thought about. At the cafe, I upsold every single customer who walked through the door. The owner loved me. The other staff hated me. I didn't care. I finished my online classes, a certificate in digital marketing, and I started freelancing on the side. $5 gigs on sketchy websites, writing product descriptions for dropshippers, and managing social media accounts for small businesses who couldn't afford real agencies. I worked every single day. My shifts at the cafe, then 6 to 8 hours on the laptop, surviving on black coffee and spite. I didn't go home for Christmas that year. My mother called once. "You're being dramatic," she said when I told her I wasn't coming. Marcus was joking. "You're too sensitive, Jenna. You always have been." "Maybe," I said. "Merry Christmas, Mom." I spent December 25th alone in my apartment, landing my first real client, a small e-commerce startup that needed a complete brand overhaul. They paid me $800. I cried when the money hit my account, but this time it felt different. Cleaner. Year 1 became year 2. I quit the cafe and went full-time freelance, which was terrifying and stupid, and the best decision I ever made. I lived on ramen and fear, but my client list grew. I learned email marketing, funnel optimization, conversion rate psychology. I became obsessed with understanding what made people buy, what made them trust, what made them believe. I was good at it. Better than good. By year 3, the year my Uncle Richard had bet I'd move back home, I was making 6 figures. Not from one job, but from 12 clients, 16 projects, 100 small victories that added up to something I'd never had before. Security. I didn't tell my family. When they called, rare, obligatory calls on birthdays, I kept my answers vague. Still doing the marketing thing. Let them assume I was scraping by. Let them think they'd been right about me. Year 4, I hired my first employee, a virtual assistant who handled the administrative work I hated. Then a graphic designer. Then a copywriter. I wasn't freelancing anymore. I had an agency. Small, remote, but real. We had actual contracts, retainer clients, monthly recurring revenue. I moved out of the studio into a 1-bedroom with a dishwasher and windows that didn't rattle. I was 28 when my mother called and asked if I'd come to Nicole's baby shower. Of course, I said. Wouldn't miss it. I wore a dress from Target and drove my 8-year-old Honda. I brought a gift from the registry, something practical and mid-priced. I smiled and hugged everyone and asked the right questions. How far along? Do you know the gender? Have you picked a name? Nicole looked tired and swollen and radiantly happy. We're so excited, she said, one hand on her belly. Jason's already talking about a college fund. He's so responsible. That's great, I said, and I meant it. I didn't hate Nicole. I never had. I just wanted her to see me. How are you doing? She asked, and there it was, that slight emphasis on the you, like my well-being was a charity case she was checking on. Still doing the online thing? Yeah, I said. Still at it. That's good. That you found something. She squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you for sticking with it. I smiled and excused myself to the bathroom, where I stared at my reflection and reminded myself that patience was a weapon. Year 5. Marcus's original bet. I was supposed to still be at the cafe, according to him. Instead, I was landing my first major corporate client, a mid-sized tech company that needed a complete digital marketing overhaul. The contract was worth $200,000. I signed it in my apartment, now a 2-bedroom in a nice neighborhood, and then I sat very still for a long time, just breathing. I thought about calling my father, telling him about the contract, proving something. Then I remembered what he'd said about participation trophies, about effort, about coasting. I closed my laptop and poured myself a glass of wine I'd actually chosen because I liked it, not because it was on sale. Time, I'd learned, was the most brutal teacher. It showed people exactly who they were. No hiding, no excuses. Just the slow, inevitable reveal of character. I let more time pass. I scaled the agency, hired a full team, rented an actual office space, developed a specialty in e-commerce brands, the kind that grew from nothing to 7 figures in 18 months. I became the person they called when they needed results, when they needed someone who understood urgency and hunger. By 30, I was running a 7-figure agency with 23 employees and clients across 4 countries. I bought a house. Not a mansion, nothing ostentatious, but a real house with a yard and a mortgage I could afford twice over. I drove a new car. I had a retirement account. I went to therapy and dealt with the anger I'd been carrying since that Thanksgiving dinner, the anger that had fueled me but was also eating me alive. "What do you want?" my therapist asked. From this. What's the end game? I thought about it for weeks. I didn't want them to suffer. That's what surprised me. I wanted them to see, to understand that they'd been wrong, that their cruelty had been casual and therefore worse, that they'd almost destroyed me and didn't even know it. I wanted them to reckon with what they'd done. So I waited longer. I was 32 when my mother called in tears. "It's your father," she said. "His business is failing. The accountant says," her voice broke. "We might lose the house, Jenna. Everything. I don't know what to do." My father had run a small manufacturing company for 30 years. It had been stable, successful enough to fund my siblings' educations and their endless, effortless lives. But he'd refused to modernize, refused to adapt to e-commerce, to digital marketing, to the reality that the world had changed. "I'm so sorry, Mom," I said, and I was. Not sorry enough to feel guilty for what I did next. "Is there anything?" She stopped. I could hear her pride grinding against her desperation. Do you know anyone who might be able to help? With marketing or..." "Let me make some calls," I said. I didn't make calls. I showed up. 3 days later, I drove to my childhood home for the first time in years. My father answered the door and barely recognized me. I looked different, polished, professional, healthy in a way I'd never been when I lived under their roof. "Jenna?" He blinked. "What are you doing here?" "Mom said you needed marketing help," I said. "I have some experience with that." We sat in the living room, the same room where they'd placed bets on my failure. My mother made coffee with shaking hands. My father explained the situation: declining sales, outdated customer base, competitors who'd gone digital while he'd insisted on trade shows and cold calls. "I just need to get in front of people," he said. "I need them to see the quality of our product." "You need a digital strategy," I said. "Complete overhaul. Website, social media, email marketing, possibly a rebrand depending on what the audit shows." He frowned. "That's expensive. Those agencies charge." "I run an agency," I said quietly. The silence was profound. "You what?" My mother set down her coffee cup. "I run a digital marketing agency. We specialize in manufacturing and e-commerce. I have a team of 23 people. We've scaled 14 companies from 6 figures to 8 in the last 2 years alone." My father stared at me. "You're successful?" The word hung between us like an accusation. "Yes," I said. "Very." "But you were working at a coffee shop," my mother said. "You dropped out of college." "You." "I was 23," I said. "I'm 32 now. A lot can happen in 9 years when you're motivated." I watched them process this. Watched the confusion, the disbelief, the slow, creeping realization that they'd been fundamentally wrong about me. "Why didn't you tell us?" my father asked. I could have said a lot of things. I could have mentioned the betting, the humiliation, the decades of being treated like the family disappointment. Instead, I said, "You never asked." That landed differently than any accusation would have. "I can help you," I said, pulling out a contract I'd drafted on the drive over. "Full digital transformation, 6-month intensive program. My normal rate for a company your size would be $80,000. My father's face went white. "We can't afford." "I'll do it for free," I said. "On one condition." They waited. "Thanksgiving dinner this year. I want everyone there. Nicole, Marcus, Uncle Richard, Aunt Carol, everyone who was at that table 9 years ago. And I want 5 minutes to talk, uninterrupted." My mother looked at my father. Something passed between them, shame, maybe, or the beginning of understanding. "Okay," my father said. "Yes. Thank you, Jenna." I saved his company. It took 7 months, not 6, and it wasn't easy. But I knew how to find audiences, how to build trust, how to convert attention into sales. By October, his revenue was up 47%. By Thanksgiving, He'd hired 3 new employees and was turning down orders because he couldn't fulfill them fast enough. He cried when he thanked me. Actual tears. "I almost lost everything," he said. "You saved us." "I don't know how to." "Just keep your promise," I said. Thanksgiving. Everyone there. They were all there. Nicole with her 3-year-old son. Marcus looking older, softer around the edges, his wife pregnant with their second. Uncle Richard had gained weight. Aunt Carol's hair had gone gray. My grandmother, smaller now, sat at the table with an oxygen tank beside her chair. We ate. We made small talk. It was almost normal, almost comfortable. Then, after dessert, my father stood and cleared his throat. "Jenna has something she wants to say." I stood. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "9 years ago," I said, "I sat at this table and listened to you bet on when I'd fail. Not if, when. You made jokes about me getting pregnant by a loser, about me moving back home, about me having no follow-through. You did this while I was in the room. While I could hear you." The silence was absolute. Nicole's face had drained of color. Marcus wouldn't look at me. "I want you to understand something," I continued. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because I need you to know what you did. You took a 23-year-old girl who was struggling, who was scared and broke and doing her best, and you made her into a joke. You gambled on her failure like it was entertainment." "Jenna," my mother started. "I'm not finished," I said, and she closed her mouth. I could have given up. I was so close to giving up. But I didn't because I was angrier than I was scared. And I want you to know that I built everything I have now, everything I've become, on that anger. I used it like fuel. Every time I wanted to quit, I thought about this table, about your laughter, about Uncle Richard's $20 bet. I looked at Richard. He'd aged badly, I noticed. "Did you ever pay Marcus, by the way?" "I'm still not at that cafe." I'm 9 years past his 5-year prediction. No one spoke. "I run a 7-figure agency," I said. "I own my home. I have a retirement account and investments and employees who depend on me. Last year, I was featured in Forbes for scaling e-commerce brands. And do you know what the saddest part is? I didn't tell any of you. Not because I was hiding it, but because it genuinely never occurred to me that you'd care." Tears were running down my mother's face. My father looked like he'd been struck. "I'm not here for an apology," I said. "I don't need you to say sorry or make excuses. I'm here because I want you to understand that your words matter. Your beliefs about people matter. You almost killed something in me that I spent years rebuilding." I sat down. My whole body was shaking now. "I'm so sorry," Nicole whispered. "Jenna, I'm so sorry. I didn't think." "I know," I said. "That's the problem. You didn't think. None of you did." Marcus spoke finally, his voice rough. "I was a different person then. Younger, stupid. I thought," he stopped. "I don't know what I thought. That it was just jokes. That you knew we didn't mean it." "But you did mean it," I said softly. "That's what you don't understand. You meant every word. You genuinely believed I was going to fail." "We were wrong," my father said. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, smaller. "We were so wrong about you." "About everything." I nodded.
"Yeah.
You were." My grandmother reached across the table with a trembling hand. I took it. "I'm proud of you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I should have said something that day. I should have stopped them. I'm proud of you, and I'm sorry." That almost broke me. Almost. We sat there for a long time, the weight of 9 years pressing down on all of us. Then Nicole got up and hugged me, and she was crying so hard she couldn't speak. Marcus stood awkwardly, then pulled me into an embrace that felt desperate, apologetic. "I'll do better," he said. "I'll be better. I promise." My mother and father both hugged me, both crying, both saying sorry over and over like it was a prayer. I let them. I'd earned this. Not the apology, the honesty, the accountability. The moment where they had to look directly at what they'd done and who I'd become despite them. Later, after everyone had left and I was driving home through the dark, I called my therapist's voicemail, even though I knew she wouldn't answer. I did it, I said. I told them. And I don't feel what I thought I'd feel. I'm not triumphant. I'm just tired. I was tired. Bone tired, soul tired, the kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying something heavy for too long and finally setting it down. But I was also free. Time had destroyed them, just like I'd known it would. Not in the dramatic way I'd once fantasized about. No public humiliation, no financial ruin beyond what my father had already faced and I'd helped him overcome. Time had destroyed them quietly, privately, by forcing them to watch as I proved every assumption they'd made wrong. They'd bet I'd fail, and I'd let time show them exactly how catastrophically they'd miscalculated. The real destruction, I realized, wasn't in their suffering. It was in their understanding. They'd have to live now with the knowledge of what they'd done, who they'd dismissed, how close they'd come to breaking someone they should have protected. That was the revenge, making them see themselves clearly. I pulled into my driveway, into the garage of my house, and I sat in my car for a while with the engine off. Tomorrow I had meetings, client calls, a company to run. I had a life I'd built from nothing but spite and stubbornness, and a refusal to be who they'd decided I was. The anger that had fueled me for 9 years was gone. In its place was something quieter, stronger. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not yet. But peace. The peace of knowing I'd survived them, outlasted them, become someone they couldn't have imagined that Thanksgiving night. I'd won. Not by destroying them, but by building something they couldn't tear down. And that, I thought as I finally went inside, was enough.